Alright, last attempt I made to make this video apparently didn't record the audio, which is lovely. Here to do my review of UFC Live Cruz versus Johnson from DC. And I went 6-4 on the card. The officiating will be somewhat of a picked on subject throughout this. And I'm not a guy who likes to pick on refereeing. I do it a lot. But I don't really like to, because I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. But there are two particular stoppages here that just make me shake my head. You will see which ones those are. So, coming up with the first fight of the night, Weil Watson versus Joseph Sandoval. Weil Watson applying a considerable reach advantage. A couple nice kicks, knocked Sandoval down. A couple of people are saying this may be an early stoppage. I didn't really think so. It could have gone longer and it wouldn't have been a problem, but the fact of the matter was Sandoval was getting pretty well tooled on the feet and didn't really seem to have an answer and was clearly somewhat out of it. And that's why I'm good with the stoppage. What's next for Weil Watson? Honestly, don't know. I would like to see him test against a wrestler because I think that's his Achilles heel, and I think we need to see where he stands with that kind of thing. Has he learned to deal with that particular problem, training with the Alliance MMA team, Dominic Cruz, and so on. Next up, Josh Neer versus Keith Wisniewski. I think he's training with them anyways. I could be wrong on if he's training with Alliance MMA, but Keith Wisniewski, Josh Neer. Great display of completely lackluster defensive body shots and defensive elbows by Wisniewski. Also, complete lack of display of defense against body shots by Josh Neer. Not a very technical fight. And for two guys that are just not very big at 170, this kind of highlights their careers as 170-pound fighters, is that I just don't think they can do anything. If you don't have the technical level, and you don't have the size level, and you don't really even have the athleticism to kind of make up for it, I don't know what you really are. They're two tough guys. They're both hard to finish. Eventually this fight coming to an end at the end of the second round when the doctor, I believe, was called in to look at the cuts on Wisniewski's face from his inability to defend that repetitively in the clinch from Josh Neer. And they stopped the fight on the basis of that. Wisniewski, I'm sorry, kid, you're 0-2 in the UFC. Both of those fights, you really didn't show a lot of technical ability. You didn't show a lot of athleticism. You didn't show a lot of size or smarts, because the way to beat Josh Neer has always been to use his not amazing takedown defense and take him down. He's got good stuff off his back, but you can minimalize him. We saw it with Kurt Pellegrino. We saw it with Gleason Tebow. We've seen it a couple of times. As for Neer, also really not UFC material at 170. Maybe at 155. But apparently he has a hard time making 155. At 170, what does Neer get next? Because you rarely get cut off of a win. You know, if we want an exciting kind of fight that will see him, you know, just, I guess in a nutshell, do some things. Eric Silva is actually kind of a weird matchup that I would like to see, having come off of his win in Rio. So Eric Silva. Another option would be, also Eric Silva's another guy who I don't think is all that big at 170. I could be mistaken, and he could just be fighting like big guys when I'm thinking this, but every time he fights someone that I'm familiar with their size gauge, it's just kind of like, you really don't look like a 170. And Josh Neer's kind of in that same boat. So those two could make an interesting fight. If you want him to lose, put him up against any wrestler that has some good stuff, basically. Moving on to the next fight of the evening, which is our first crappy stoppage. Shane Roller, TJ Grant. TJ Grant came out. Boxing looked a lot better. He looked pretty comfortable at 155. Apparently this was the best cut of his career. He looked just very good in all rounds, because Shane Roller is a very reasonable fighter. And he did a good job. He took Roller down a couple times. He stuffed Roller's takedowns a couple times. He worked Roller on the ground. There was some beautiful groundwork in this fight, and this should have been fight of the night had it not been for what was not a very good ending to it, which was that Grant locked on an armbar, but Roller still has hands clasped, like so, but was getting pushed to his back, and the beginning of the end possibly was upon us, and the referee called the fight, And it's a bit weird because you don't see a referee call the fight much. He claims a verbal tap. Roller denies it. Grant, isn't saying that he tapped so much as saying as he may have yelped. And apparently, if you do that, the ref is supposed to stop the fight, which I think is a stupid rule and not realistic, because we've seen, like, particularly the best example of this is Chael Sonnen getting stuck in submissions and just screaming when he's stuck in them. That seems to be like his thought on defense for submissions, is if I scream loud enough, he'll let go, which has eventually been stopped, but never that quickly. And yeah, I don't know. If it's the rule, it's the rule. It should be changed. But the thing is, also, the referee for this one was Fernando Yamasaki, who's had some just bad calls. I think he also was the ref in the fight I'm going to talk about later. That was a bad stoppage. I don't remember. It was one of the Yamasaki brothers. Yeah, it was getting booed from that point onwards, and rightfully so. People are going to say he's got, he should know with his high credentials and stuff. It's like, no, you should never. When the hands are clasped, I don't think you should ever call the fight. I mean, the arm was starting to bow. It was getting there. He was getting, rolled over. But it wasn't there yet. Anyways, congratulations on TJ Grant on once again doing his win-loss thing. It would be nice if he could put 2 wins together. He's kind of the white equivalent of Takeya Mizugaki at this point. They don't seem to win back-to-back fights in the UFC, and it's not so good. Mind you, I think it's just generally been because of the matchups. They give him someone that he can beat, and then they give him someone who's going to beat him, and then, etc. This is his first kind of, surprising win, I suppose. So, what's next for TJ Grant? We've seen him against a wrestler. I kind of like to see him against one of the BJJ players at 155. I think him versus Thiago Tavares. That's a pretty interesting fight, and we'll go with that one. So, moving on to the next fight of the evening, Mike Easton versus Byron Bloodworth. Byron Bloodworth taking this on short notice. Mike Easton looking like some combination of Joe Stevenson and Dominic Cruz for the first round, which is, I'm going to snarl at you, kind of look like I'm having an epileptic seizure. Yeah, that doesn't really work when you're not throwing shots. I'm putting that out there to Mike Easton. That was weird. And when you stop doing it, the fight started going very much in your way. So don't do it. Easton finishing with knees and punches. What's next for him? Well, this fight really didn't tell us much because Bloodworth took it on such short notice. So we could do the Jeff Hoagland fight that was supposed to happen and bring that out for another time. Let's go with that. Next up, we had Michael Johnson versus Paul Sass. Michael Johnson looked good until Paul Sass, basically got his heel and would not let go. And that's kind of all there is to it. He's now 12-0 off of the strength of basically heel hooks and triangles. Go figure. He apparently doesn't have a lot of wrestling. His stand-up doesn't look very good. So I'm not really sure how far he can go. But I guess if you're willing to continuously pull guard like he is and submit people, yeah. Let's see him against someone with sub-defense before we really start, talking about it, though. Maybe a Rafael dos Anjos. Maybe it's another guy coming up with a good sub-defense, good BJJ background. Yeah, I guess dos Anjos is the one I'd kind of go with as a possible fight. We'll see how he does in that one. Tavares would have also been a good one, but I gave him the TJ Grant matchup. Here we go. Continuing on. Eve Edwards, Rafael Oliveira. Oliveira looked a lot better than Rafael Oliveira, has looked in some time. He looked quick. He looked good. But Edwards looked kind of like the old school Eve Edwards. Eve Edwards outstruck him, out-wrestled him, and won this fight with a stoppage 2 strikes. What's next for Eve Edwards? Honestly, anyone. Eve Edwards is just one of these guys who he's so good at a lot of different things that he makes a good matchup with a lot of different styles of fighters. And if I had to name one that I was kind of hankering to see him fight, I guess it's really tough to say. Maybe Ross Pearson. That could be interesting. Or conversely, the guy who just beat Ross Pearson, Edson Barbosa. I think both of those fights could be quite interesting. Or Dennis Seaver. So, like I said, there's a lot you can do with Eve Edwards. Matt Wyman versus Mac Danzig. I thought Matt Wyman won this fight, and the judges agree with me. A lot of people thought Danzig won, and I wouldn't really argue it. You could see this fight for both of them. I thought I gave it to Wyman on the basis of I think he outscored him with wrestling. Should have watched this fight again before putting this out here, but I think he out wrestled him a little bit. I think he attempted more subs that were close, and I think that both of them were largely even in the stand-up because neither had any remote boxing defense. This was a good brawl, and that was it. Otherwise, it was just kind of sad, to be honest. Moving on, Anthony Johnson, Charlie Brenneman. Terrible stoppage. Again, I think it was Fernando Yamasaki. Johnson stuffed the takedowns, did some good work with some knees on the ground, did some work with some punches on the ground, and eventually hit him with a head kick. But when he hits him with the head kick, and you kind of think, that's a flush head kick that should be a knockout. Maybe you start moving towards stopping the fight if you're the ref. But you look at his face, and he's clearly still there. And he also breaks his fall with his elbows, which kind of also emphasizes that he's still conscious. So, bad stoppage. That being said, things were going downhill very fast for Charlie Brenneman. As for next fight, there's a lot of talk of Koscheck rematch for Johnson and also Jake Ellenberger. I'm good with both those fights, to be honest. They're somewhat entertaining, although I'll let it slip that I don't think Johnson wins either of those fights. But they're good fights. Oh, for Wyman, honestly, I don't much care who he fights next, to be honest. He's just a brawler who seems to be getting more Asian with every fight. Pat Barry, Stefan Struve. Pat Barry did what he could. I mean, when you're a foot shorter, he worked the legs pretty good. You saw a lot of redness on Struve's legs. He was hacking them. He landed a couple of punches to the face, but not with a lot of power because he had to punch up like this to hit him in the face repetitively, which didn't really work all that well. One thing I kind of ignored when I was predicting this fight, I kept thinking, Struve's got a better ground game, but his takedowns are terrible. But I completely forgot about the fact that, when you're a foot taller, it's really easy to throw on flying subs. And that's basically what we got here. Struve decided, I'm going to put you in a triangle. And that's all there is to it. Barry tried to slam his way out of it. Nice power bomb. But Struve broke his fall nicely. Didn't take a lot of damage for it. And just finished the choke. Next for Stefan Struve. I said it before, I'll say it again. I don't really think Struve's that good. He's got a good ground game on the basis of really long legs, but his defensive striking is not very good if you can hit him, if you're anywhere near his height. His ability to use his reach it looked a little better, but it's still pretty bad. And who do you put him up against? I don't know. Although a match I want to see from Pat Barry is Mark Hunt. Make that happen. Dominic Cruz versus Demetrius Johnson. Dominic Cruz, with a broken hand apparently for most of the fight, managed to generally outstrike Demetrius Johnson. Demetrius Johnson doesn't quite have the accuracy he has, even though he might be quicker. And Cruz managed to generally outstrike him, generally out-wrestle him, and on the ground control the fight. He couldn't finish him. And you see that a lot at 135 because there's a lot of really good scramblers at 135, and that's kind of all there is to it. He had his back and maybe should have finished, but didn't finish. I would have liked to see him post up and start landing some blows instead of keep going for the choke. But it was another impressive display by Dominic Cruz. Continues to dominate the 135-pound division. Next for him is whoever gets the next title shot, which I believe will either be the winner of Riyad Faber and Brian Bowles, or the winner of Henan Barrow and Brad Pickett. So that's my thoughts. I'll be back with a UFC 136 prediction, hopefully later today or at the latest tomorrow. And I will see you guys later.